Animate Weapon is a skill which allows you to summon weapons off the ground to fight along your side. Instead of tedious manual casting, most players will want to automate the summoning of the weapons. The unique bow Null's Inclination combines well with some other unique items in order to create the ultimate automatic animator. Hi guys, Catmaster here. Welcome to another video. Today we want to talk a little bit about this semi-automatic bow summoning character that uses a selection of interesting, unique interactions in order to summon an almost never-ending supply of skeletons and weapons which will fight for you at your side. But before we go into the video, quick disclaimer. This is not a full build guide, this is just a quick video where I ramble about interesting interactions in a build that I put together in hardcore solo self-found with just stuff that I found off the ground. This is by no means perfect or optimized in any way, so keep that in mind if you want to copy this. There's probably better build guides around. I do like to make my content as educational and informative as possible, so you'll definitely learn something if you stick around. And if you like this sort of content, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Also, if you want to see more of the build in action, make sure to check out my stream at twitch.tv/CatmasterOP. And thanks to everyone who came over and supported the stream with their presence, with Twitch Prime subscriptions or whatever. So I think this build is best explained if you saw it in action first, but before I show you some gameplay, let me quickly give you a rundown of the most important core interactions of the build so that you'll understand what's going on. So this build uses the unique bow Null's Inclination, which triggers socketed minion spells on kill with this weapon. Now, Null's has been in the game since 2.0, that is in 2015. And 2017 and 3.0 we got Speaker's Wreath. Speaker's Wreath is a unique prophet crown that reads minions hits can only kill ignited enemies, which is obviously almost made for Null's Inclination because it allows you to snag all the kills while your minions deal all the damage. The weapons and the skeletons will then damage enemies to 0 or 1 HP, and then I can kill them with my Scourge Arrow cast while channeling setup, which I use to trigger Desecrate, Bone Offering, Blade Fall, as well as Elemental Weakness. Now, when I first enter a map, I will not have any minions other than my Spectres, which are there mainly to generate charges and don't have a lot of damage. But because I have so much minion damage from the tree and I have a pretty decent bow, I can use Blink Arrow in order to create clones of myself which use my weapon and can damage the first pack for me. I then use my Scourge Arrow cast while channeling setup, which also triggers the Toxic Rain from the boots in order to snag the kills that the minions give me for free. The more I kill with the weapon hits, the more I summon new skeletons and weapons, and as long as I keep channeling for a little bit on every other pack, I will have Bone Offering up, which provides block and life gain on block to both my minions and my character. I can utilize Val Summon Skeletons to summon an army of skeletons, which will help end the fight sooner and benefit from all my buffs. So yeah, that's how the build works. Now let me quickly go into why and how I set it up. So as some of you may have seen while I was playing on stream, I did get a 6-link Null's Inclination from Heist, and yeah, then I slowly started collecting the gear together without really knowing what different twist I would put onto the setup this time. But at some point, someone posted on the Reddit that the replica Lionized Paws would work with Mirage Archer. You can put Mirage Archer support onto the Toxic Rain that is provided by the boots, and that's triggered every time you attack with a bow. It does come with a 1-second cooldown, but we know whenever you hit, the Mirage Archer will then use the skill for another 4 seconds, which helps to spawn more Spore Pods from the Toxic Rain, which will detonate in a short delay and provide additional, AoE damage hits that can clear and claim kills with your weapon in order to trigger more minion skills. The only problem is that Toxic Rain does typically apply also a damage over time debuff in an area before the spore pods explode, and we're solving that by going Avatar of Fire, which will turn all my damage into fire damage, or at least a 50% portion of all my damage into fire damage, and then give me the line deal no non-fire damage. So that completely disables all the chaos damage and chaos damage over time that I would have had on Toxic Rain. This also allows me to reduce enemy resistances to cold and lightning damage with all my hits, because I only deal fire damage via Elemental Equilibrium. And in order for the minions to take full benefit of that, we're doing a full cold conversion with 4 green sockets on the unique Triad Grip gloves, which provide conversion based on the color of the sockets on the gloves. So this was the first thing that I decided in the build. So I knew I was going to run Dash and Blink Arrow with Second Wind support in order to provide an additional cooldown use and increased cooldown recovery rate to those mobility skills, as well as Enhance to provide quality. And I mean, I had found a level 2 Corrupted Enhance on the ground, so just threw that in there. Technically, you could also put Smoke Mine in there for another movement skill that gives you a movement speed buff, or you could get creative. There's other things that you can do. For the main skill, we're using Val Summon Skeletons as well as Animate Weapon in a support with Elemental Army, Minion Speed, Minion Damage, and Melee Splash. Elemental Army applies exposure and grants them resistances. Minions typically start at 40% resist and they don't get a penalty from killing Act 5 and Act 10 Kitava like your character does, but they still kind of should have cap resistances. So that's why I'm using this at the moment. But I think I need like 1 jewel in order to get them to cap. And then we can put the Elemental Army on a different summon. We're going to have that on the Spectre later. More about that in a moment though. So minion speed, because I don't have the highest mobility right now, and it's a limiting factor for, you know, the minions to go from one pack to another pack. And minion damage as well as a melee splash, which obviously helps the clear massively, but I also got an elemental damage with attacks here that you can swap in if you want more single target. So the elemental damage with attacks doesn't do anything on the boots. I'm actually using Mirage Archer, faster attacks, and Culling Strike here on the Toxic Rain, so just faster attacks, so the Mirage Archer gets as many attacks out during its limited duration. The duration does scale with my duration scaling though, so getting the skill effect duration here and here in the tree will be helpful. For our aura setup, we're reserving mana for a Precision, a Hatred, and a Clarity at the moment via Generosity, so that these don't affect my character, but they only affect the minions, but at a higher effect. Or like allies nearby, but I play solo Self-Found, so there's no one nearby. Feels bad, man. Anyway, I'm running a unlinked Spectre gem in an unset ring, and this is where we're gonna change things up soon, because I'm currently leveling gems in order to construct a Hungry Loop unset ring, which can consume up to 4 uncorrupted support gems. So this can have 4 support gems on there, and those will then support whatever skill gem you put in there. So my plan is to have Blood Magic, Feeding Frenzy, Elemental Army, as well as Meat Shield in order to make the Spectres beefy and make them able to sustain their charge generating abilities without me running Clarity on Generosity, because that's the crutch that I'm just using right now. These minions are a Host Chieftain and a Stygian Silverback, which generate power and frenzy charges respectively via a Warcry-like ability, but they generate them for all allies in the area. But they need mana for their abilities, that's why we're running the Clarity on Generosity right now, while we're hoping to link them with Blood Magic in the future. Last but not least, we're using Scourge Arrow with Castwall Channeling, Desecrate, Bone Offering, Bladefall, Elemental Weakness. Desecrate generates the corpses, Bone Offering consumes them in order to grant block, spell block, and life recovery on block, and Bladefall is there to generate blades for when enemies are not dropping anything. And Elemental Weakness as the last one in the Castwall Channeling link It does respect the order of the linked gems, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But if you channel and then you cast Desecrate, it remembers where it was, and the next one is Bone Offering, no matter whether you keep channeling or you interrupt your channeling. Scourge Arrow is just a nice complement. You don't have to use Scourge Arrow. There's other channeling skills. If you have a blue socket, you could use Wither, because that applies the Wither debuff, which reduces enemy movement speed, which is kind of helpful as well. In 2.0, as we all know, there will be an Ascendancy passive that will allow you to use melee skills with a bow, so then you'd probably be using Cyclone with this setup.
This here is what we're calling the Tactician.
Close combat specialist. Well,
It's self-explanatory, really.
It is relatively self-explanatory.
We can quickly go over the itemization, and then I'll show you the tree and the Ascendancies in detail. So, as I said, Null's Inclination, because trigger socketed minion spells on kill with this weapon. The minion damage per dexterity is kind of nice. Maybe it can be useful in a dex stacking build. It doesn't seem like too much of a bonus to get 100% increased damage if you get 1000 dexterity. So for me it's like, it's a nice bonus on top, but I'm not investing more into dexterity because of this. You know, as a summoner you really want to get these minion survivability and minion nodes in general, as they're super valuable. Speaker's Wreath, of course, as I said earlier, because of minion hits, can only kill ignited enemies, so that leaves all the kills for you to take in order to proc Null's Inclination more often. We're using Rearguard because there's no other synergistic quiver. I mean, this is just perfect. You could make a point for Maloney's Mechanism in order to trigger even more bow skills to get even more last hits, but I think we're doing quite fine. This is nice synergy with the block from Bone Offering, and we can even get a little bit more block in the tree later on if we get a Lionized Fall. I'm using the Jinxed Juju, which is also a nice reason to run Spectres, because 10% damage from hits is taken from your Spectre's life before you, which artificially inflates your life pool and makes you a lot more survivable than it looks at face value. It definitely adds a lot of survivability. Lionized Pause for the trigger a Toxic Rain when you attack with a bow. You could probably do it with the regular Lionized Pause. I'm not sure whether Mirage Archer works on it, but they're not 100% necessary. You can still get enough kills with the Scourge Arrow. We're using Belt of the Deceiver because it's a nice starter item. It reduces the extra damage you take from critical strikes. It gives Intimidation for nearby enemies, which means they take increased attack damage, which is dealt by your skeletons and by your animated weapons. And it's nice life and all res, but obviously not as good as a really nice Stygian Vise or something like that, if you can get the Intimidation elsewhere. Now, Triad Grip, as I said earlier, convert based on the socket colors of the item. You could also do a 4 blue setup and convert it all to lightning. I decided cold damage is better because with the power charges, the minions crit quite frequently and they actually freeze most of the monsters. And that just makes it a lot safer, especially seeing that they don't kill the monsters, they just bring them to 1 HP and then my character has to kill them. The Unset Ring I crafted with an Essence of Fear in order to get minion movement speed. Ideally you want to have minion movement speed on as many items as possible, because movement speed is really the limiting factor for minions in a lot of situations. It will just massively improve your clear, but it also would work without it. I'm using this ring simply because I really needed the dex, but we're probably gonna try and replace this one somehow with the Hungry Loop when we change things later when the gems hit 20. This one's really nice though for an ES build because it has tier 1 maximum energy shield as a fractured mod, which means I can just chaos spam or even essence craft it without ever losing that mod. So I hope I don't die on this character so I get to keep this ring. As always, between the flasks we have shock remove, bleed remove, freeze and chill remove, curse remove, as well as movement speed. And we got an instant life flask in order to make your life a lot easier, because when you take a burst you can just instantly fill up again. In the tree we're pathing out of the Scion, picking all the jewel sockets on the way and basically going from life cluster to life cluster to life cluster to life cluster. The only exception being we extend for Avatar of Fire, and for Enduring Bond, and of course for the stats here, which we require in order to equip the bow. I'm picking up the entire 3 notable wheel Redemption, Spiritual Aid, and Righteous army, but I'll have to do some path of building calculations in order to find out whether the minion accuracy here is actually necessary, because the increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you is really not necessary at all, as my minions deal the majority of the damage and I just deal the last hits. Also picking up reduced mana reserved in order to be able to run all the reservations that we want to run. Like I said, we're currently running Clarity, but as soon as we got Blood Magic on the Spectres, we want to replace the Clarity with a Wrath, and replace this Precision probably with a lower level Precision in order to still have enough mana to use all the abilities. Wrath will add a lot of flat lightning damage to the minions, which will make them able to shock with their crits, and also just overall make it much more damage. Between Indomitable Army and the resist node leading up to it, and Sacrifice, we actually already have plus 33 minion elemental resistance, which together with the base of 40% minion elemental resist almost puts them at cap, but you can't just remove the curses on minions with the flask, so if you care about your minions not dying, you're gonna have to overcap them for the resists. I'm currently looking to get another minion resist jewel just to cap them off without elemental army. I think I'm fine with the skeletons and the weapons not being overcapped, but the specters really need elemental army in order to have their resist so overcapped that they won't die in high pressure situations, say like an edge breach where they're cursed with conductivity and they're standing on the balls. The obvious great perk about being an Ascendant for this build is that we're able to get both the Mini Necromancer and the Mini Guardian, providing offering skills also affect you at 50% effect, a little bit of minion damage, a little bit of attack and cast speed, as well as minion AoE, which helps the melee splash. Guardian, on the other hand, gives you 25% reduced effect of curses on you, which would stack nicely with Sanctum of Thought over here, which I considered picking up, and also provides physical damage reduction as a bonus effect to the auras from your skills for your minions. Every 5 seconds you regenerate 20% of life over 1 second. You can see that on the defense tab, my life regen jumps up for 1 second to above 1000 every 5 seconds. Which is really nice if it comes at the right time, but most of the time it's just I look at it as an additional 4% life regenerated per second over 5 seconds. It all comes in at one burst, you know, 20% over 1 second, but if you average it out, it's just like 4% per second. The line about the power, frenzy and endurance charges being shared doesn't affect summoners because minions don't count as party members, but the most important aspect of being a mini guardian, while there are at least 5 nearby allies, you and nearby allies have onslaught, which means for this build, basically as soon as you got going, you have permanent onslaught for yourself and the minions, which means that you don't need Ravenous Horde. Now, as a matter of fact, it's much better than Ravenous Horde, because Ravenous Horde gives minions a 10% chance to gain onslaught for only 4 seconds on kill, versus us having permanent onslaught. Onslaught is 20% attack, move, and cast speed, so it's very valuable not only to the minions but also to the summoner, because it's just nice to run around with more movement speed. You can reposition faster and so on. Really value. I don't know what we're going to do with Uberlap though. You could pick up the alternative start, but then there's nothing really that you want to do, and there's not really a lot of points that you can save. Like, you can get a little bit of regen here, or you can path into the tree here, but overall it's just much worse than pathing in here, because you really want that jewel socket anyway, I think, and the resists are massively helpful to a build that uses so many uniques. We're already struggling for resists in this build, and we're also struggling for flat life. Getting to 4.6k life is actually an achievement, I think. But we're still trying to go for more than 5k, obviously, because that's when builds start feeling okay, in my opinion. 5k is the bare minimum. Because of this lack of resists and also lack of life, we want pretty much life and resists on as many jewel sockets as we can. This one I even socketed just for the fire resistance at the moment, until we can craft a better one. And here we got a Ghastly Eye Jewel with blind on hit with attacks, which is obviously really good when you have a lot of minions and they're all hitting a lot of times per second. 4% chance to blind on hit with attacks means basically that any enemy that is alive for longer than 2 seconds is pretty much guaranteed to be blinded. So really, really good, because blind halves enemies' chances to hit you. Another important note that I didn't mention during the tree is Resolute Technique. Comes at no cost, actually helps the build because it prevents me from igniting with my all fire damage skills by dealing random crits. Resolute Technique prevents you from dealing critical strikes and also grants hits can't be evaded, which is super helpful because every single hit will be a hit regardless of the defender's evasion and your accuracy. So you don't need to worry about scaling accuracy in a build that's already struggling to get resists and life. As soon as the elemental damage with attack support for swapping with melee splash on single target is done leveling, I can actually keep it in my inventory and put increased duration on the Mirage Archer Toxic Rain setup. So the Mirage Archer just has a higher uptime, and there's also a longer delay to the Toxic Rain spore pods being placed and exploding, meaning a higher chance that my minions actually already got to the enemies and brought them to 1 HP before they actually deal the culling strike. And that's it really. It's a really not so straightforward build concept, probably not the best build, but I like it for its flavor and the cool interactions, and I'm hoping to push it a little bit harder and to give you guys a build guide and to maybe even do some Conquerors and red maps with this, or Delirium. But we'll see how well it fares. Right now we're still leveling the gems obviously, and gem levels do matter a lot on the minion skills, and there's also some gear upgrades we can still probably get. If you enjoy this kind of video, again, make sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you'll always get an update whenever I upload new content. If you have any questions about the setup at all or playstyle, also of course if you have suggestions for improvements, maybe I overlooked something, I'd be super happy if we could make this build even better together. Feel free to drop a comment down below or say hi on the stream at twitch.tv/CatmasterOP. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters Jawmass and Lionel. You guys rock. Thanks everyone for watching. Have a beautiful day, and I hope that the patch for Heist on Monday or Tuesday lands hard and we can all enjoy this league finally to its maximum potential. Until then, have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.